Well, on behalf of the Society, I would like to welcome you to our first historic bike tour. We're very excited about this whole event, but I can tell you that coming here started 10 years ago when the team from the Massachusetts Pequot Museum came to us and said they were part of the American Battlefields Protection Program, and they were related to the Pequot War. They told us they were going to do a dig here and asked us if we would be the headquarters for that. That started 10 years ago. We have been involved with them at some level right up until now, and it's been quite an experience, wonderful experience for this society. It today will include David Naumec, and we are very excited about that. He has been our partner for over 10 years, and he knows everything possible that you can know up to date on this war.
Actually, we could throw the greenfield on like that there.
So thank you all for being here, and thank you to our incomparable Historical Society in Old Saybrook. They do so many great things. You're going to see it later on. You're going to have a box lunch there. And you're going to, before that, enjoy a beautiful ride, which I've already done this morning. Mr. Levy did not wake me up. I'll be very clear about that. I've already been out for probably 30 miles. So anyway, the roads you're going to do are spectacular. I mean, there's no better, most of you know this already, no better roads to bike and run. And not only are they beautiful, but they're historical. You're going to see a lot of historical sites this morning along the way. I know you're stopping down at Saybrook Point, but it's just, and it's a perfect day for it. So it's a beautiful ride. Along with some history sprinkled in. You have a great host to take you along the way. You're going to enjoy a fantastic lunch, which I may join you for a little bit later. Thank you for coming here. I know some of you, most of you from in town, but a lot of you, several of you from out of town, and just really enjoy it. It's a beautiful ride, and it's a beautiful route. One thing to be super careful of is sometimes the roads do narrow. This is New England after all. It wasn't built for biking necessarily. Some of the roads are too narrow. There's not enough of a shoulder. So be really careful out there. But enjoy your ride and look forward to seeing you a little later. Thank you.
No, we're giving a talk. So, welcome to our first stop on the tour. You could start or end this tour any way you would like if you were biking on your own, but for our purposes, we're going to start down here at Cornfield Point, which few realize has real direct significant relation to the Pequot War. So if you're not familiar, the Pequot War was fought between September of 1636 right through about August, July, August of 1637. And eventually when the Pequot sachem, their main leader, Sassacus, was killed and his remains brought to the English, they considered the war over. I won't talk a lot about the background of the war because I'll bring it up in different areas, but essentially we're on the land of the Nahantic Indians. And the Nahantic peoples lived here, you talk to them forever. There's archaeological evidence and their traditions of several thousand years, but native peoples have probably been down here in Saybrook since the last ice age, like 15,000 years ago. As the ice, first off, the glaciers got as far as there, right, Long Island, pushing all that good soil off the earth, dropping it there at their terminus, receding back. Long Island Sound was a lake for the longest time. And in pulling back, native people started to inhabit the land. So the Niantics were here for, thousands and thousands of years. And in that time, the last several thousand, when corn was introduced, or a couple thousand, this is where we get the creation of this place name, Cornfield Point, because the Niantics start clearing massive acreages of land in some of the best soils, which are here, thanks to that glacier pulling back, right? And when the Dutch arrived, maybe Spanish before them, Dutch, and then eventually the English, they found these lands already cleared. And cornfields had been planted along with the rest of the three sisters, corn, squash, beans, probably planted throughout this entire area. Notice, as we've all noticed, and our calves have noticed, right, it was an incredibly level landscape as we pedaled here. The biggest hill was that last kind of incline just up here barely. And that's kind of rare in general for a lot of the landscape around here. We know how rocky the area is. We see all the, the New England landscape. So these were the native cornfields. When the Dutch arrive and enter an exclusive relationship with the Pequot and Niantic Indians for European trade goods, metal, cloth, all that kind of stuff, firearms, what are they trading for? They want wampum, which is purple and shell beads from the Welk and Quahog shell collected right here on the shorelines. Those shells you could find more or less from Narragansett Bay down to about New Jersey. Native peoples would grind them into these tubular beads, string them, and they had an extreme cultural significance that we still don't even know about today, in that they were used and traded and exchanged for everything from birth and death and marriage and war and peace and just diplomacy. It was an important piece of their culture. So the Dutch realized that. They realized that they can get wampum, they can trade it for the best goods up the Hudson River for the best furs, right, from the Mohawk, that inland stuff. They take it back to Europe, they make money on the furs, come back with goods, trade for wampum. The cycle continues. So from about 1624 to the Pequot War, 1636, the Dutch, the Pequot and their allies had this economic relationship. It drew the English into the region too, once the English realized the importance of wampum. Where do you get the best wampum? Here, on the shoreline. And also, you go up the Connecticut River, the Farmington River meets the Connecticut, right? And that's where furs are coming down from, further New England. So this is all the fur trade region we're living in right now. The Dutch plant a small colony here at, I'm going to say it wrong, Pashabek. I think that was the Algonquin word for this region, Pashabek. They call this area Kievitz Hook. And later they also named this region Zeebrook, or Zeebrook. Eventually Saybrook comes out of that term. But Zeebrook or Seabrook is a common Dutch port name, in Europe. So they plant a couple people here, and then they go away after a few years and kind of consolidate in New Amsterdam, New York City, right? All right, English start pouring in here about 1633 as Pequot Confederates that were kind of tributary to them by force want to break away. They want their independence from the Pequot. They had been conquered by them on the upper river valley. They invite the English in, and they settle the towns of Windsor and Wethersfield and eventually Hartford. To back up a bit, the Dutch have a trading post at what will be Hartford, the House of Good Hope at 1633-34. So this area, beginning at the mouth of the river, all the way up to basically Springfield, is really busy real estate in the early 1630s, with multiple native tribes kind of subjugated in multiple ways by the Pequot. You got Dutch interest here, you got English interest here. Ultimately, it'll break out in war by about 1636. And why is that? A couple English traders are killed in the region. One, Captain Stone, who is a Virginian, is killed in the midst of a Dutch Pequot War occurring in the 1630s. He's killed right here on the river, close to Saybrook, within the bounds of Saybrook. We don't quite know where, but we think Ragged Rock Creek, if you kind of know where that area is, by Ferry Point. At any rate, later another English trader is killed that away off of Block Island, John Oldham. That facilitates the English in Massachusetts to declare war. They do so. They invade Block Island and later burn some Pequot villages on the present-day Thames River. At that time, backing up, we'll talk more about the fort, the construction of the fort. I'm just trying to get us to Cornfield Point here again. Lion Gardner and the English garrison of about 20 some odd, 25 people, start working on Saybrook Fort and construct it by about June of 1636, or March I should say. It's nearly done. And at that point, they pretty much take over this area as their cornfields. I'm sure they negotiated somewhat with the Nahantic or the Pequot to, have access to this area. If you have cornfields, there's multiple Nahantic villages close by. There's also some Nahantic burial grounds, notably the old cemetery where, that we're going to be riding by later probably began life as an Indian burial ground as well. So if you got burial grounds, cornfields, villages, this is an active Nahantic area. But they actually don't mind having the English and the Dutch here earlier because, at the point, because it gives them access to trade goods. In peacetime, that's fine. Just look how long it took us to get here. I believe it's 2 miles or 1.5 miles from the fort, from the point, on foot to go down essentially Maple today and whip up through here. We followed the historic, probably Indian trails and then later Dutch and English access roads to get here to the cornfields. The only other quicker way was by boat with a shallop, a small flat-bottom boat across South Cove, which we'll go by shortly as well. So important area. When war breaks out, Gardner writes, and I think I have some quotes here as well, about how important the cornfields are. If the English start a war with the Pequot, they're going to be fighting it here. Well, you all, the quote is to Endicott, who's leading Massachusetts forces to attack the Pequot. Gardner says, "You come here to raise these wasps around my ears, and then you'll flee back to Boston, leaving me, to fight the war essentially." And he understands that there's 3 points of war: men, munitions, and victuals, as he calls it, or food, as he mentions it. So you have men, you have munitions, forts and cannons, but it means nothing if you don't have food. Saybrook Point relied on, or the fort relied on Cornfield Point right here. So much so they built a blockhouse or a guardhouse, like another half mile up we're going to go by, hence the name Guardhouse Point. So I always found it very unique that on the map today, on the landscape, you have these 2 ancient place names, like right here in Saybrook, that go to the Pequot War and beyond, frankly. Cornfield Point has been a cornfield for probably the past 3,000 years, more or less until development. And Guardhouse Point was that garrison detached to defend this at times of war. I'll let the cars go by quick. All right, not going to belabor this because we can, ask questions, we can take a look at the artifacts, but when the war breaks out, as Gardner predicts, the first targets are the cornfields. That's also the native way of war as well. Minimize casualties. Instead of frontal assault on Saybrook Fort, you're going to take heavy casualties, you lay a siege and you starve them out. So the whole name of the project name that we worked under from phase 1 to 3 is called the Siege and Battles of Saybrook Fort. And I think that's very accurate. This was a 6-month siege. Those first 6 months of the war, the Pequot were like 99% victorious against the English. We'll talk about that. They come here and essentially draw the English out of their blockhouses by just laying low. A couple English go out to go hunting for birds. They go fowling. They're going for ducks and everything in the wetlands here. Once they're loaded up and shoot their guns off with, fowl, they're walking back to the guardhouse, and the Pequots ambush them. And right then and there, kill and capture 3 of the 4. One guy makes it back wounded, which leaves now 2 men in the blockhouse. They signal Gardner. He comes and evacuates them. And as soon as they start pushing off and rowing back across South Cove, the blockhouse is up in flames. The cornfields are up in flames. So the Pequot achieved that objective of pretty much wiping out the English food supply. So now, from here on out in the documents, Gardner's begging upriver to Hartford and up to Boston, like, you gotta send food. We have nothing left. We're living off of dried peas and whatever. Now, this is also an area where the cows and the goats and such are also walking around, so the Pequots are attacking them. And the fort is in dire straits by about October of 1636, as they've now pretty much run out of food and they're on the defensive. So here we are. I'll stop talking too much, but again, please take a look at this. Happy to answer some questions. If you have anything specific now, we can go over it as well. But the next stop will be a ride by Guardhouse Point, and then to Saybrook Point, and we will start considering more about the English occupation at the fort. So. Okay, welcome to the next stage of our biking tour, but what I would consider really the first stop of your exploration of this whole siege and battles of Saybrook Fort. So here behind us is the mouth of the Connecticut River, very important, vital area for peoples many thousands of years ago. So we're going to begin the discussion with the native peoples in the area. We already talked a bit about the last glacial period. There's Long Island out there to remind us. But by about 1,200 years ago, more or less, maybe 1,000, the date keeps getting pushed back, corn or maize is introduced to this region coming out of like Mesoamerica, the south, working its way up. It becomes incredibly important to all native peoples because now with corn and combining that with squashes and beans to maximize your acreage, you can really have a food supply that can maintain large populations. Instead of hunting, gathering, moving, you still move seasonally, but not massively across the landscape chasing mastodon and stuff like that. Now you're doing agriculture, manipulating the tree resources for certain nuts, berries. Deer are incredibly important, at this point. So we're on the land here of the Nahantic people, and their territory more or less was, this side of the Connecticut River at the mouth, going up perhaps as far as present-day Essex perhaps. It's kind of tough to figure out these boundaries between people that are all heavily related to one another as well, and likely towards Hammonasset Beach out that way. So the Nahantic people, like other Algonquin peoples that lived along the shoreline here, probably had several villages, had the leisure because they're on the shoreline, some of the best real estate then and now of all the estuarine resources. I mean, people are still fishing here today, right? So that's been going on since there's been people here. And then these cornfields and other agricultural areas, which we just stopped at. So you pretty much have seen it all. With the arrival of the Europeans, the earliest would have been intermittent explorers, perhaps Spanish, perhaps French, definitely the Dutch. By the 1600s, the Dutch have a presence in present-day New York, New Amsterdam they call it. And in expanding their trade through the region, they meet the Nahantic people as Adrian Block around 1614 or so starts exploring Long Island Sound and going up the Connecticut River, mapping the area, meeting the peoples. More or less, doing reconnaissance for trading partners. And these are some of the most important people because they have access to wampum production, which we talked about and discussed. So the whelk shells, the quahog shells, the purple of the shells. And they were also, probably even prior to the arrival of the Europeans, closely related to their Pequot neighbors right to the east, right across the way, whose homeland more or less, present-day Groton, Stonington, and up towards Patchogue Pond, Connecticut border. We tried to discuss here, again, the relationship with the land, the native communities that was here. This area was known as Pashabeck or Pashabeck, the area near at the river's mouth. I mean, that's more or less what this place name translates to. When the Dutch arrived with their couple of families that are planted right here somewhere on the point, probably on the higher ground where we're going to go to, so it doesn't flood, and just in general there's good drainage. There's only several families, but within 5 years they recall them all to New Amsterdam. And it won't be again until the English arrive with Lion Gardner essentially, that there'll be another European settlement here.